Hello, everybody. My name is John Colford. I appreciate you joining us today for another interview on spiritual transformation and following your life's purpose and what that can do for you and do for the world as a whole. I'm here today with Michael Tucker. He is the co-founder and CEO of Go English Chat. And I'll let you talk. He'll talk a little bit about his website and some of his businesses later. He's also founder and CEO of Tucker Coaching and Consulting. And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about what he's doing with those and share with you how that fits into his life's purpose. So how do I know this amazing gentleman? Well, he and I went through a course together that deals with spiritual transformation. And it's a course that when you're complete, it gives you a blueprint of your soul. And the last interview I did with Annette Pingatori, and I encourage you to watch that as well. She was actually our an intuition coach, and she helped us through that course. And so she was an amazing person, and she gave a great interview to talk about what her life's work is and how that fits into helping others. And we are living proof of the benefits of what her life purpose is, because we both went through that course and found amazing a transformation. And he and I know each other because we started collaborating together after that blueprint course, and he and I have been friends ever since. And so I really appreciate his time and effort today joining us. I know your time is valuable. You've got a lot going on. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today, John. This is super exciting to watch you do this. This is really wonderful.
Yeah, and appreciate that very much. It is exciting, and I'm excited to get to know what you're doing. And so what I'd like to do right away, Michael, because everyone has a lot of credibility, and what you're doing is amazing for the world. But I want them to get to know you as well, because what helps people to understand is to understand the person behind it. And so today, I'd like you to just share a little bit about your background, about growing up and what you did for your young adult life, and then how that background sort of led you to the Soul Blueprint course.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was preparing for this interview, John, I was just making notes of looking back at my life and making notes of, I think Dr. Phil calls them defining moments.
Yeah.
Looking at these defining moments, and specifically as it relates to spirituality. And there were 5 really big moments for me. And I grew up in a small town in Hopkins, South Carolina. So, I think maybe at the time there was 5,000 or 6,000 folks there, just about 10 minutes outside of Columbia, South Carolina. And it's a relatively small community, working class, predominantly Black community. And my parents were just incredible, loving, supportive human beings. But like everyone, they had their challenges, and I talked a moment ago about these 5 defining moments. It's almost as if spirituality or God or the creator of the universe, people have so many words for this creative force now. All of these, one particular time, the first particular time where I feel like I was really drawn and connected with the creator was actually through my mom. My mom, she, incredible woman, but suffered a lot just throughout her life, dealt with a lot of mental and physical illnesses and so forth. And that really hit me. And as a very young child, I started asking these questions about why am I here, and these kinds of things. And that led me, I would say by the time I was in high school, even though I had kind of grown up in the church, I sought that out on my own. Christianity, that was what I grew up with. And so then when I got to college, I went to the University of South Carolina, and when I got there, I just began to search more because I was in a completely different environment. I didn't know these 30,000 students from around the world. It was uncomfortable. I didn't feel prepared. But that was another really important moment for me, where I sought spirituality, and just kind of having my own transformative moments. And then after that, I joined the military. And as you know, being a veteran yourself, I mean, there are so many moments when you have to look to a higher force, something outside of yourself. And so that got me involved. At this time I was studying Judaism and Kabbalah. Some people say Kabbalah. I was studying that at the time. And then when I ended up leaving the military in 2006 and got into business and network marketing and so forth, that led me into personal growth and the books and the seminars. And then from there, that also connected me with the Centers for Spiritual Living, Dr. Ernest Holmes and his teaching. And also during this time, this is where I found the work with the Center for Intuitive Education. At the time, I was actually speaking at a conference. That's how I met Lynn. And she was just so incredible. And after her talk and after my talk, we just decided that there was something that we needed to engage with. Something that there was some kind of connection there. It was magic and we could feel it. And some months later, I found myself, taking her courses and then attending the event where I met you. And then I would say the fifth big moment here was recently. This was 2 years ago. I went I was in China for about 5.5 weeks. And I ended up meeting up with a buddy of mine who I hadn't seen in a while. And he said something to me that shifted the entire direction of my life. And it was so powerful because it was so much in alignment with the work with intuitive education. He says, Michael, I've known you for a very long time. And yeah, you're a good person. And he said, you've always been trying to do this transformation work. But I think the thing that you're missing and that you don't understand is that you're never going to enter the door of transformation through the door of transformation. You've got to go through the door of love. And when he said that to me, I had a lot of different emotions about it. My first emotion was anger, because I was thinking, like, how dare you, tell me that I don't, love folks. But the more I thought about it, and I had a long time to think about it, because I had taken a train from mainland China over to Hong Kong, and on my ride back, I realized that he was completely right, and that I had never really dug deep and really studied and mastered this thing called love. And so that's what I've been doing ever since.
That's pretty spot on. I mean, love is the most powerful force in the universe. There's no doubt about that. And I appreciate you sharing that background, because it gives us a lot of insight, into who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. When I first met you, I have to say, we'll get into your life's purpose here in a minute. But when I first met you and started having conversations with you on our ride to Phoenix and back, and then after that, I started to realize just how brilliant you are in terms of, your philosophy on life and your study, and you're truly fulfilling your life's purpose, which is to raise consciousness. And we're going to go into that in a minute. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I found you probably one of the most intellectually stimulating people I'd ever had a conversation with. And you always cease to amaze me. And I wasn't joking when I tell you I've got a little notebook, of our collaboration calls, and I got the brilliance of Michael Tucker written down on a few spots, So when you decided to go to the Center for Intuitive Education in Sun City, which is just outside of Phoenix, we're only about an hour and a half away from that. When you went there and to take those courses, did those courses do what you anticipated them doing, or was it so much more for you? In other words, was the transformation, was it more of a general understanding and a growth internally, or was it more of a sort of enlightening where you found and discovered things about yourself that you really didn't know existed?
Yeah. So the reason that I moved forward and really sought to engage with the center was because all my life I knew that I had these intuitive faculties. Um, I would sense things, I would know things before they would happen, and so forth. I had always wanted to develop these gifts, but I did not know who to trust to help me develop these gifts. That was really big for me, and I felt like for a very long time I had not met that person, and that's why I went to the program. And I trusted Lynn, and I trusted the work that she was doing. Like, intuitively, it felt right to me. And so as a result of doing that work, it did open up. The best way I can describe it is like living in a house, but maybe only going to maybe your bedroom and the kitchen, right? But there's this whole rest of this house, right? In terms of intuition and imagination, and just being fully present with who you are and why you're here. It's going to all those rooms, and I felt like that's what that experience made available to me, is access to those rooms.
Yeah, that's well said. That's a great analogy. I think most people would agree that you do start to discover the rest of the house, and it was really amazing when you and I shared stories about what we learned out of it. Even though your soul blueprint and mine is it's very different, it's also very similar. And I think that's one of the things that vibrationally drew, to each other, because we're both pursuing the same thing. We have a little bit different way of going about it, but when you and I shared what we'd learned out of that, it was very similar. And those times I spent with you, learning about what it meant to you, it was confirmation to me that what we were both pursuing is very similar. And I appreciate you sharing with me about the Blueprint course and what you got out of it, because I think it ties directly into what Annette and I were talking about. And one of the things you get out of that Blueprint course is a really good understanding of what your life's purpose is. So can you share with everyone a little bit about the discovery, what you put into your life's purpose, which the words were raising consciousness, and what does that mean for you, and what did that help you do to know what you needed to go and then do after the course was over, what to pursue, what's your path forward?
Yeah, sure. So what that looked like for me, like, as a result, yes, you walk away with the Blueprint, which you complete as a result of taking, I think it was 8 or 10 classes. And I think for me, what it did was it kind of held my feet to the fire. It not in a hard way or negative way, but it really allowed me to just be honest with what was there for me. And then from that moment on, I could no longer not do that, if that makes sense.
It does. Makes sense.
And
it's like
so
personal, positive accountability.
Yeah, and not just because of the coaching and these kinds of things, but also internally, right? Internally, there's this realization about what I am is deeply important for me to honor now. And so when I think about what it means to raise consciousness, that can be kind of like a woo-woo-y kind of a word, or kind of language, but really what I think a simple way to think about it is the simplest way that I can think about it is supporting individuals and myself in that, and using all of our mental, physical, spiritual, and particularly spiritual faculties, so that we as a species can evolve. Right now, the human species, for the first time, I would say, in recent history, is aware that it is evolving, and they're participating in their evolution. Our species is, we're, putting in, artificial hearts, and, putting things in our skin to get into locked doors and all kinds of things, and there's all this technology. I was reading an article just yesterday, and it was talking about they've come up with a way to put a neural net in your brain to connect you with a computer. So I mean, and they've been working on this technology for a long time. And so I think about those kinds of technologies, and I can definitely see the good and the advantage of those kinds of things. But frankly, I almost feel like they're it's kind of a knockoff of what we naturally have the ability to do, our God-given abilities and faculties. That we have all of that within us. And so when I think about raising consciousness, it's supporting those who want to explore that conversation and elevate the awareness of what they're fully capable of as a human being living in this really dynamic, amazing world.
I appreciate that. So, so when we talked about raising consciousness, you shared with me what after that course, you started to really, as you mentioned earlier, start to follow that life's purpose. And it was almost like you could never go back now, because you now know that this is who you are and what you're about. And I know you're doing a lot of great work on raising consciousness. We'll go into that in just a second. Can you share with me a little bit about, maybe in your words, of like the before after picture, like when you mentioned that now you can't not fulfill that purpose. What was it like, and if you could turn it in terms of before and after, where you're following your life's purpose, what is that feeling to you? What is the pleasure and the joy and the passion you get from that?
Yeah, well, sometimes there's pleasure and joy and passion, and sometimes there's just a bunch of pain. I'll be honest with you. Because here's the thing, when everything in the world, there's so much that's grappling for our attention all the time. And this world is so rich with colors and experiences. It's very easy to get lost in those things. There's so many, I think the Maya or illusions that to get involved in. And I would say there's some discipline not to lose oneself in that, but I would also say that I think for me, there's this very strong groundedness that allows me to see the world and say, leave that alone, do that. It's a very strong groundedness, and it's very hard to explain, but I feel it like right here in my chest, like it's very strong. And I didn't have that before. Before, it was kind of like, oh, well, this seems great. Let's get involved with this group or that group. And I think that's the other thing too. It was never, in the past, I was never really the captain of my own ship. I was always following somebody's program or agenda. And I just, unless I can see that that collaborating with someone is inextricably linked with this higher purpose that is very visceral to me, I just don't do it.
Okay, so I truly understand, because when you talked about going from chasing different things to where now, when I first met you, we started talking about your past, and you were talking. I mean, it was almost like you were chasing a lot of different things. You were excited about them, and you got something from them, but you were chasing. But then you talked about the lessons learned from those. And then when I've talked to you ever since, and you seem very focused on what you're going to do. And yes, there is pain involved, but you seem very focused, and it's almost like you just know what you need to do. And when I started listening to what the newer things that you were working on, I was very excited about it, because it fit in exactly with almost everything you're about. I know you do coaching and consulting, and you're now co-founder and CEO of Go Eagles Shack. Can you share with the folks that are watching a little bit about both of those and how they fit into your life's purpose and what they do for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I think about coaching primarily and consulting as well, the folks that I like to work with are business leaders, executives that are soul centered. They believe that there is something more for them to not just do, but be in this lifetime. And so by collaborating with them, I'm able to support them through inquiry and dialogue to assist them at elevating consciousness. And I'm able to do that with them very directly. Um, something, Go English Chat is a little bit different. And it addresses a couple of things. As I've grown and evolved as a person, as a human, as a spiritual being, one of the things that has consistently come back to me is this idea around bridging the spiritual with the world that we live in. And specifically a conversation, a higher order of conversation around justice. And I believe that justice is not something that we fight for. So justice is something that we create through imagination and creativity by challenging the status quo. And so Go English Chat is a platform that allows people who desire to speak and practice English. It matches those individuals with folks in their similar profession to help them speak English specifically for that profession. Now, how in the world does this have to do with justice? Anymore, if you are seeking to do business anywhere around the world at a large scale, you need to know English. 80% of the web is in English. And so if you don't have access to training, if you don't have access to the language, you are essentially shut out of the global economy, which, as you know, there's a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's always been there, but this is a way to begin to bridge that gap through conversations where people connect with each other. So not only are they practicing English for their respective profession, but they're connecting. And so it makes it, it creates an opportunity for folks to know maybe someone on the other side of the globe and what they're experiencing and what their life is like in a way they could have never known before. And so that's really the work around economic justice that I feel that Go English Chat brings to the table. All of the studies, all the research shows that, when people speak English, they can increase their income by 30 to 50%. It's very, very huge.
That's a lot.
And yeah, it is. And then on top of that, there's an epidemic in our country, which is around loneliness and isolation. It is massive. I think our Surgeon General under President Obama, he called it an epidemic. And there are so many people who have a desire to connect with folks. And what I've discovered when we've watched these connections happen over a platform just like this, where people begin to communicate with someone from a different part of the world, there's this lightness and this joy that comes about because they realize, like, oh my God, like, we are all the same. This person's no different than me. And
so it starts as a language, but when you describe this to me, well, you're coaching as well, but when you describe this to me, it was literally bringing people together to bring consciousness between two different groups of people to a higher level. And it wasn't just about the English. The English was a conduit in order to do that higher consciousness.
Yes, that's right.
And you always think outside the box. And I know we talked about all the other things you're studying, and we talk about the things that you're learning and the things you pursue. And there's other people around the world that are raising consciousness, and you're following and working with them too. And when I heard you talk about this Go English Chat, you were so excited about it. You were so passionate about it. And I could sense in you that it was something, a greater purpose, which it will absolutely end up serving that. And so let's talk a little bit about, your future and the things that you're planning on. I know you can't, you probably can't tell me what you're going to be doing 5, 10 years from now, but I know, in the future, in the near future, with the Go English Chat continuing, do you have other ideas for the future, or is this some sort of can you talk a little bit about, the next 1 to 3 years of your life and what you're sort of planning on pursuing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you right now, Go English Chat has definitely taken up a lot of my attention and energy. We've been working on this for a year, um, and um, and I've been introduced to this whole world of technology and how to build technology companies and these kinds of things, and that's all very interesting. But where I would like to see this the lessons that I'm learning from this experience with Go English Chat, where I would like to see that go is into conversations, bigger conversations than just people's work or their job. One of the um, um platforms that I was working on some time ago was we created this organization called the Institute of New Thought. And so it explores a lot of these kinds of deep conversations. And I'd like to, maybe there's some way that those two worlds can connect at some point.
Right.
We'll see. But yeah, going forward, what I'm very, very clear about is the conversations transcending beyond, just, work type of conversations, and possibly even some collaboration between individuals in different parts of the world to solve specific challenges and problems there on the ground. Um, uh, this is a big idea that we've been exploring and working on. And specifically, what I mean, where I got this program, this concept from was actually I had read this article about these children, and they're kind of like video pals, with children in the States and some children in a country in Africa. And this was a math class, and the children in Africa were saying, hey, some of the members of our class are missing because they couldn't cross the river to get to the school. And so these children, they started connecting with each other and communicating about what the challenge was with this river. And eventually they brought in, engineers and scientists and so forth, and ended up building a bridge so that the children in this African village could actually go to class, because these fourth graders had the insight to collaborate on solving a problem that government was not going to fix, and no one else had frankly really had thought about fixing. So I'd love to see something like that take place with this platform in ways that I haven't even begun to imagine.
I have no doubt that that's going to happen, and that's kind of what I was hoping you'd share a little bit about, because I know that in past, when I worked for a global company, we had people in different countries, and they would get together, and the conversation would always go well beyond work, and some of those people ended up going on to other things and collaborating on larger platforms, exactly what you're talking about. So I have no doubt that that's going to happen with what you're trying to do. That absolutely will happen, and it'll be exciting when that happens. And I hope that you post those stories on your website to let people understand the positive things that are coming out of that. So if someone were to go and learn about Go English Chat or get a hold of you for coaching and consulting, how would they do that?
Sure. So, I mean, we have a website. It's called goenglishchat.com, and folks can go there and check out what we have to offer. Specifically, one of the things that we're looking for, and we're collecting resumes because we're looking for English speakers in different professions that want to communicate about that profession to non-English speakers. And so if that's something that folks want to do here in the American side or English speaking side of things, they could just send me an email to letschat@goenglishchat.com. And then for coaching and consulting, the businesses, as I mentioned, the businesses and leaders that we're seeking to work with are folks that feel like they have this kind of calling, or there's something just kind of knocking on the door, and they really are wanting to express it in a bigger way through their work and through their life. They can find me at tuckercoaching.net. And then the email for that is michael@tuckercoaching.net.
Perfect. So what I'll do when we're done with this interview or the call today, I'll go ahead and post those on YouTube below the description. So if anyone wants to get a hold of Michael, I'll post all that information on there so you can take a look at it and have a link that you can go to. So is there anything else you want to share with the folks watching today before we end the call? And again, I truly am very thankful and blessed that you took time out of your day to do this. I think it'll help a great deal of people. Anything you want to share before we go?
Yeah, well, John, I just want to say thank you to you for stepping into your truth and honoring this moment. I've had a chance to watch some of the videos and so forth, and just, of course, our time together over the past, it's always touched, moved, and inspired me to continue, this journey. That means a lot, and so I'm beyond grateful for you, for the work that you're doing, and then for the folks that are watching this. I would invite you to just to trust yourself to be yourself. Really, just trust yourself to be yourself, and love yourself. I feel like the biggest, most radical thing we can do at this point in time is to honor who we are and truly, truly love ourselves enough to step into our power and live a life that is worthy of us. And so I would just leave with that.
Those are great words to live by. And again, the Michael Tucker, if you were to write that down, I guarantee you that'll end up somewhere. You always amaze me. Your passion for the world, your passion to connect others, your passion to raise consciousness, and your passion to improve yourself, which is the number one, is really inspiring. So I appreciate your time today. Please tell your lovely wife I said hello. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. And make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because there's going to be a whole lot more interviews that I'm going to continue posting. And I'm going to bring in more speakers and interviewees from different walks of life and different life purposes, so you can understand what is truly possible when you do what Michael's talking about, which is, number one, truly go inside and know yourself, and then you can become a beacon of light to help others. So Michael, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you on our next collaboration call.
Thanks. We'll see you soon, John.
See ya.
Bye-bye.